Hello. Regular viewers will know I've been waiting to work on this JVC DV and miniDV deck a little bit more, and I'd got a power supply for it now because the power supply I was using didn't deliver enough current. But we need to make a change to the plug on the end to fit this slightly unusual power socket on the back here, which I think is the same as fitted on the Sony DSO-11. I ordered initially I'd ordered some plugs and they didn't fit, so I'd ordered an adapter now, which I hope will go from that to this. And I ordered it well over a week ago. It's been an extremely long time waiting for that. I mean, it just seems to be forever.
Very slow delivery.
Oh, right, thank you. One very slow delivery. So hopefully this is the adapter we're looking for, and we will be able to power this up. Okay, so all we have is hopefully an adapter. So it's not even a plug. So it needs to hopefully go from that end there. That's a good start. And then this, I'm really hoping, will fit the back of this. That looks very promising. And of course the polarity is retained, so it's center positive. And this is center positive. So we can power this up now. Okay, all powered, all ready to power up. So we want to see whether it all works and what happens when we play some of these tapes. Right, I've left it in the mode I was using it. It seems to have stayed in that mode where it gives us the error counts on the display. So you get that. So these large numbers here, 65535, those want to go to as low as possible on both heads. So these are the two heads, the two channels. So when I press play, I want to see not just a good picture, but I want to see those head towards 0. Okay, this recording is in widescreen and we're playing back in 4:3, so everything's tall and thin. Error numbers in the 20s, 30s, 40s look completely right. So this is a recording I'd made on a Canon camcorder back in 2016. So those numbers look correct. That's all looking very promising actually. All those error counts are entirely low enough. So I have a certain amount of faith in this, even though we had some errors from this on certain tapes before. Now, one of the things I was hoping to do was be able to record on these DVCPRO tapes, and I think it spits them out. Is it spitting it out? So it went through the trouble of finding there's a recording on there and then spat it out. So if I cover up these 4 gold contacts, will it ignore the fact there's a tape it doesn't like and just carry on and work anyway? Let's give that a whirl. Right, let's see if that makes any difference. It's flashing a tape light. It's playing the tape. It's a DVCPRO recording, so it can't play it. Rewind sounds a bit laboured. Picture search is okay, but just rewind is hopeless. Where I've made a DV or DV cam recording on here, DV cam I think it is, that plays just fine. So it's DVCPRO it can't handle, even though that's a JVC and Panasonic Matsushita type recording. I guess DVCPRO was before this machine was built. So it's useful to know that DVCPRO tapes can be made to work on equipment that doesn't like DVCPRO tapes by simply covering up the gold contacts. Okay, having got this JVC DV deck working reliably, let me show you what I'm going to do next, because a few people have been asking me about a demonstration of capture of digital video using Firewire. So we'll note that on the back of the machine there is a Firewire socket. It is there. There are, well, at least two sizes. In this case, we're going to consider there to be two sizes, 6-pin and 9-pin. So this is the smaller 6-pin, and I call it Firewire Small personally. So we could connect that to a Firewire socket on a PC. So typically you have to add them in. They're not typically installed in modern PCs, so you can get these cards. These are older PCI ones. You can get PCI Express ones, and usually they have the 9-pin, or as I call them, Firewire Large connectors only, but occasionally you can also get a small one. Somewhat frustratingly, I find that these typically have 3 external connectors and 1 internal, and you think, well, what in heaven's name is an internal one used for? Perhaps I could just route that round to the front, but I find that tends to be paired up with one of the external, so you only actually get 3 ports on these. So install one of those, or a more modern version, and then you'll get yourself a small to large or 6 to 9 way cable like this. A few devices, there's a Sony HDV deck, have the larger type socket on the back, which is very welcome, because these are way more robust than the smaller 6-pin ones. But I need to warn you about this, that don't call it Firewire for nothing. This all looks pretty straightforward. You plug that into there and it's only going to go one way, and that works. But if this socket is well worn, and the plug might be a bit worn as well, it can under some circumstances be possible to plug it in back to front. The amount of wear required on that to allow the plug to fit the wrong way round is not that much. And once upon a time, Mrs. Video 99 plugged one of these in back to front on a computer, and what's really bad is that it fries whatever's at the other end, regardless of whether that item is powered up or not. And in this particular case, it fried a Canopus ADVC55, which cost me almost £100 to repair.
That was about 15 years ago.
So it will fry the ports on a camcorder or anything that's plugged in on that end using the smaller connector. So great care. Now, whether the smaller one could also be plugged in back to front, don't know, but it's entirely possible. But the large ones definitely do wear badly. Also, I found that these cables don't have a very good life. If you are plugging and unplugging them a lot and moving cameras around all the time, they wear quite badly, and you get to a point when they just start getting all intermittent. So I find I have to replace these quite frequently. I buy my cables almost exclusively from an eBay seller called Canable, and nothing they sell is rubbish. So this is not sponsored or anything. I just think they sell great quality and value cables. Right, so the far end of this Firewire cable is plugged into a PC that's on via a Firewire card like one of these. I'm going to switch this, well, it's in standby. Connect this up to there. Switch it on. And the computer sees it. And very often it'll say, what do you want me to do with this? Do you want me to start doing capture of video? So we're going to capture, and something just went off and on. You see, now there's a Firewire thing. It can do that. You can have problems with it going on and offline. I'm sorry, but Firewire's not that robust. Those plugs wear. This is a brand new cable, but still we're having trouble with it. Oh. That's Firewire all over, you know. On, off, on, off, on, off. Right, we'll sort that out and we'll come back in a minute. So we're going to have a go now with an old version of Pinnacle Studio. They're actually older versions again, I think, are even better. So this is version 17, I think, and version 12 is even better. But that's the one I have a license for on this particular computer. And we're going to go, in this case, import from a DV device. And we PAL NTSC or auto. Well, it's auto. This one's PAL anyway. Okay, and start capture. and you'll hear the machine start up, and we get a preview of the capture. And if you get any dropped frames, they'll appear down here in the corner, and you shouldn't with a pure digital capture route like this. If you're using a digital 8 camcorder, you can get dropped frames where there's bad edits on the tape, as you get what they call runt frames, which are not complete frames. So starts and stops in the recording and blank sections on the tape will give you what look like dropped frames, and they're not genuine. But a pure digital source like this, or a digital 8 tape on a digital 8 camcorder, should never give you dropped frames under normal circumstances. Now, something you can help to keep your computer keeping up with the data rate is to go to the task manager and find your application that's doing the capture, and in this case it's Pinnacle Studio here, and we're going to go to details. This is Windows 10, it might be slightly different 11, and set priority high, and now that will have the highest priority, so that reduces the chance of dropped frames. I've actually written myself a little routine, a little batch file. Actually, I'll include that in the details below, so you can make of that a little batch file which you can just click on to increase the priority of the file of the operating the capture software. The other thing I'd say to have success in this is to capture to a different physical drive than the operating system is on. So typically on a Windows PC you've got C drive, capture to a different drive, not just different partition of the same drive. In fact, it's even worse because the head hunts around if you've got a mechanical drive. I would suggest you have an SSD drive as your boot drive and a separate SSD capture drive internal for capturing the data from the capture system here at 13 gigabytes per hour for DV file. You can copy that onto a mechanical drive later, but just capture it straight onto an SSD. So this should be able to run, quite happily for hours with 0 dropped frames. There's a couple of reasons I find that Macs are not particularly good at video capture. One is that if you have a Mac just out of the box, it'll have iMovie on it, and it doesn't report dropped frames. Even if you have a Mac that has a Firewire port, it won't report dropped frames. And another reason is that relatively few Mac systems have 2 physical drives. So if you've got a small Mac Mini or a laptop or something like that, you won't have a separate drive you can record onto, and you're stuck with iMovie potentially, which is not very good for video capture. I find that Windows PCs are actually a little bit better for video capture, but that's just my mileage on it. Your mileage may differ. Right, so we'll just leave that capturing, and we should get a pure digital copy of the tape contents as a DVAVI file. And the great thing about that is, because it's a pure digital copy, you can even use some software to read the original time and date information of the recordings on the tape, because that metadata is recorded as part of the data stream. It doesn't appear on the screen, it's not burnt in on the screen, but it's embedded in the data stream, and you can use video software to either play back and just see what the time and date is, or to even split up your recordings based on time and date. Or you can use something called, there's a particular package called WinDV, which is very obsolete now, hasn't been updated for many years, but that can even split your recordings up based on criterion for how long the time gap is between one recording and another. So you could say if it's the same day or so many hours apart, then split it into different scenes. So that is really useful, that information is embedded in DVAVI files. I found that when capturing from HDV, high definition miniDV, and then writing out as MPEG-2 files using a previous version of Pinnacle Studio, because you're writing out, it writes out a video file and strips out all the time and date information, which is a real loss. So this is something you can do in standard definition, but is relatively fiddly, if not impossible, to achieve on high definition tapes. Right, video capture working nicely. This is a true widescreen recording. Some camcorders, of course, were just 4:3, and that's fine too. But there were unfortunately some camcorders which had a 4:3 sensor but could do a sort of pseudo widescreen, where they basically just crop the top and bottom off and call it widescreen. But worse still, they set a widescreen flag in the data stream even though it's not. And then when you capture it, it becomes super wide and really stretched because the software is making it widescreen when it's really 4:3 with cropping, and you finish up with a distorted file. So that can just be an unfortunate effect of having used a cheap camcorder which didn't really have a proper widescreen sensor. Now, a recording can only be 4:3 or 16:9, and this software, certainly Pinnacle Studio, will abort and stop the tape if the recording changes aspect ratio during the recording on the tape. And sometimes people have made mistakes with buttons on the camcorder. In fact, I've even done it myself when they end up switching between 4:3 and 16:9 several times on a tape, and every time it aborts the capture. And of course that just slows down the whole capture process for me as a transfer business, and makes the process it's hard for me to bill a customer for more when it's something they didn't know they'd ever done wrong years and years ago, and it's kind of beyond the customer's control. But unfortunately it does cause me a lot of extra time and work. Sometimes a tape might end up being in 6, 8, 10 fragments because of continuous switching. Or another trick is they had a 4:3 recording on the tape and then they recorded 16:9 on the top, leaving gaps between their recordings, and so the the playback system is continuously shuffling between the two aspect ratios, and every time it stops and restarts you lose a few frames from the start of the capture again. So it's nightmarish if people change aspect ratio in the middle of a tape. What earlier versions of Pinnacle Studio will do, but this version won't, is allow us to export to the DV deck. Alas, export to tape is not an option in this, but version 12 certainly supports that, so somewhere along the line they took that feature off. Pity really, that could have been handy. The WinDV software I mentioned earlier does support write to tape, and of course you could do that with this machine because you select the input here from input select YC or line, which means composite, to DV, and then you can record onto here, and the command to do the recording will be sent through the Firewire and start the recording on this machine. Right, we're almost there. I think I'm going to use this handy strap thing here, undo that screw, and we can connect it so that the power supply cable won't fall out. So I'll just do that. Okay, so that's fitted there. That's a really good sort of feature you get on professional gear. I'm going to leave it in this mode where it displays the error counts on the two heads, so I could keep an eye on that just in case there is a problem with this, but I suspect not really. You can get the situation where a customer's tapes will play on one machine better than another, and it doesn't mean that any given machine's faulty. It's just differences, alignment or back tension or other effects that can cause tapes to play better on one machine than another. So I think this would be a useful addition to my studio, and I'm going to go install it on a machine, one of my computers now. Well, I hope you've enjoyed working on this DV deck and also messing about a little bit with DVCPRO. I'm going to be doing plenty more content on audio and video technology in the near future. Bye for now.